All right, thank you everybody for our last workshop of research presenters. And I'm speaking in the next session, which is going to start before we stop here. So they know I'm coming late, but I'm apologizing for my rudeness running out at the end. So thank you very much. Our first presenter is Najarian. Thank you.
Just want to make sure this advances. Okay, great. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I come from a tradition when people say good afternoon, others respond, good afternoon. Okay, all right. Okay, so as Deborah said, I'm Jari Peters, or Najarian Peters. I'm an associate professor of law at the University of Kansas School of Law. I've been researching home education, specifically Black home education, since 2018. My current study, tentatively titled Over 230 Years of Black American Home Education as Child Data Protection and Educational Opportunity Ignored by American Jurisprudence. That's a mouthful, so let me unpack that. What do I mean by 230 years? Does anyone have any idea why that number? Brian? Okay, yeah, so it's pegged to what we rarely understand as one of the beginnings of Black American home education, right? At the founding of the country, at the founding of the United States of America, right? In the later part of the 18th century, African Americans pre-emancipation were home educating their children in Massachusetts, right? They had petitioned the Massachusetts legislature for what they called a free African school. Why? Because Massachusetts had the first public educational system, right? It was not segregated. Anyone could go to the school, right? However, the free Black population led by Prince Hall, if some of you are aware of the Prince Hall Masons, for example, it comes from Prince Hall, petitioned the Massachusetts legislature to create a separate school. Why? Because their children were being abused and mistreated in the Massachusetts schools. Right? And so this is archival research that we know of, that because the Massachusetts legislature denied that request, African Americans in Massachusetts created their own schools, starting with Prince Hall's family's home. Okay, and so that's where I get the 230 from. Okay, so the roadmap here. I'll go through a few of the research questions, context of broader research agenda and my methods, a description of the sample that I am building, which is approximately 40 to 60 families, some measures or preliminary findings, a few results, next steps, and I've asked that they circulate the one-pager bibliography. So context in terms of my broader research, I am conceptualizing and framing these issues beyond the law, right? The law is often a blunt tool in examining educational issues. And so I am trying to focus on surfacing incongruencies, myths, and assumptions. What do I mean by that? A few myths and assumptions about education as it relates to African Americans is that, one, parents are not involved. Two, African Americans are not interested in education. Now, all of these things are, and I could go on, right? All of these assumptions and incongruencies are quite interesting when given the fact that we just talked about this 230-year history, and post-emancipation, the first project of the newly emancipated people were schools and churches. So it's very interesting that we have this miasma of myth around disengagement, around not interested in, around lack of Black parenthood engaged in the education of their children. It simply is not true and ahistorical when we look at the actual data and turn away from the myths and incongruencies and assumptions. So what this study, as most of my studies and articles are doing, is focusing on how marginalized communities create their own solutions where law, policy, and technology create and or exacerbate marginality, all right? And so I'm not looking at just the problem. I'm looking at how communities of color, but specifically Black American communities, engage in subsidiarity. All right, subsidiarity meaning the people, the communities closest to the problem are the ones to solve the problem. Agency and self-determination, and traditions of thriving beyond simple surviving. So this all fits into the broader concept of my research agenda, which says, if lawmakers, policy makers, technologists want to do better, how might they integrate and authentically implement ways of knowing and decision-making developed by marginalized communities and formal systems? Is it possible to support and amplify other systems without reproducing marginality? If so, how? If not, why not? 2 research questions. What converging factors have given rise to the expansion of Black home education in the United States of America? What should law and policymakers know based on 230 years of Black home educational traditions related to child privacy and data protection? My methods are or interdisciplinary. This is a qualitative study that employs the following interdisciplinary methodological approaches: legal realism. I know we may not have a ton of lawyers or legal researchers in the room, so I'll just give you a very brief overview of what legal realism is. It is a theoretical framework that rejects the notion that the law is a set of neutral rules by which legal decisions are made. Instead, legal realists like Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. espouse that legal decision-making was the result of rules, public policy, and social interests which are influenced by individual beliefs and biases. I often remind my students, I teach torts and privacy, of Justice Holmes' quote. It's a very famous quote, that the life of the law has not been logic, it has been experience, the felt necessities of the time, the prevalent moral and political theories, institutions of public policy, avowed or unconscious, and even the prejudices which judges share with their fellow men. Have had a good deal more to do than the syllogism in determining the rules by which men should be governed, end quote. The law is not just a set of neutral rules, right? My methodology also includes ENI, which is in dark and narrative inquiry, and in dark and feminist or womanist epistemology, or EFE. Dr. Cynthia Dillard, who's the dean at the Seattle University College of Education, created in dark and epistemology. This epistemology has been described as, quote, a way of knowing that could serve as a means of exploring the deeper levels of the so-called heartbeat of the Black family. And darkened epistemology is defined as unmasking the traditionally oppressive political constructions and descriptions of socio-cultural phenomena and relationships, end quote. At a more granular level, as a privacy scholar, I didn't say that at the beginning, but I am a privacy scholar and researcher. I am looking at these theoretical frameworks. So home place, which comes out of Bell Hook's understanding of the home as a haven, where she says that Black people strive to be subjects, not objects, where we can be affirmed in our minds and hearts, where we restore ourselves to the dignity denied us on the outside in the public world. Also, Breathing Room, which comes out of the privacy theorist and lawyer out of Georgetown, Julie Cohen, whose famous article, What Privacy is For. The summative understanding of why this applies is the right to be and become and preservation of childhood, which is an extrapolation of what she calls privacy, what privacy is for. In some, she says it's to not be modulated and to be active citizens, right? The right to be let alone, this comes out of Louis Brandeis and Samuel Warren's famous article, The Right to Privacy, 1890 Harvard Law Review, where they define privacy as the right to be let alone. So they're defining it in a negative way, right? These are negative rights that they are purporting. And then opacité, which comes out of Edward Glisson's understanding of what it means to be illegible, right? Especially for marginalized communities who if they are legible, they are then stigmatized in various ways. So he talks about the right of opacité. So those are the main underpinnings. My targeted is so it's 20 to 60 families. The prior site said 40 to 60 families, but it's actually 20 to 60 families. Black American home educating children in the K through 12 educational systems across all home education systems, homeschooling, unschooling, self-directed education in the US and abroad, because I am looking at people who are world schooling. So some of the measures are here, but I'm only gonna go through three. The first preliminary finding, the legacy of Brown v. Board of Education is complicated, right? Brown 1, Brown 2, 1954, 1955, right? Does everybody remember what Brown v. Board did in the United States? Anyone? Just say it out loud. Okay, so it's supposed to be the law that overturns separate but equal, right? Overturns the 1898 case Plessy v. Ferguson, separate but equal, right? Which is segregation. So Brown is supposed to overturn segregation by law, right? Which we call de jure, right? It did not eliminate segregation. In fact, our schools are more segregated today than they were in 1954 and 1955. New York State has the most segregated schools in the country. So Brown has a very complicated history and legacy, all right? Home educators push back against a lot of the hoopla and the celebration of Brown because of many of the failures of Brown, right? I have a picture here of Dr. Fenwick's book, Jim Crow's Pink Slip, where she talks about how the decision, how integration, desegregation essentially devastated Black schools, Black communities, right? How Black teachers were fired, how Black principals were fired, right? How white teachers with lower credentials were replacing Black teachers and Black principals, right? With integration and desegregation, right? In my own home parish of Calcasieu, parishes of Calcasieu and St. Landry, for example, my great aunts and aunts, they talk about how all of the teachers had to have bachelor's degrees. All of the Black teachers had bachelor's degrees. The principal had a PhD. This happened in Virginia, this happened in Georgia, this happened in DC, et cetera. Whereas the white teachers and principals, many of the white teachers, if not most of them, thank you, Deborah, had what they called certificates. And yet the Black teachers were fired. The principals were fired or pushed to the white schools, right? And so we have what is acknowledged as a decimation, right, of Black educators with integration and desegregation. So again, the legacy of Brown is complicated. In 1934, W.B. Du Bois wrote, "Does the Negro need separate schools?" He concluded it doesn't matter if they are separate schools. He said that Black children need teachers in schools that care about them. And with integration, there was a policy, a de facto policy, right? Not de jure, but de facto policy, that white teachers would integrate but not educate. This was the chant that they would use, right? It was subversive, it was insidious, and it created a lot of the problems that we have and are navigating today. We're still today in our formal schools, 70 to 85% of all public school teachers are white women. The other finding is that Black American home educating families are distrustful, rationally distrustful of data created and codified in student records. In my article, The Golem in the Machine, I talk about how data in student education records are fraught. They are subjective observations, right, that are codified, calcified in the education record. Black home educating parents want to remove or not to introduce their children to this type of datification, right, based on subjective measures, right, that calcify a picture of their children as insubordinate, not willing to learn, right? All of these things that are a part of the myths and assumptions, right? Last preliminary finding that I'll share is that Black American home educating families are creating Black data traditions. I just published 2 summers ago an essay with 5 foundations here in the UK titled Black Data Traditions. And there I argue that Black Americans, but also Black Britons, have been creating their own dossiers for their children who are home educating and or educating their children outside of formal educational systems. This is very important, especially when we think of algorithmic bias, et cetera, when we think about how this data gets into the student record. So these types of, again, self-determined moves is really what I am focused on. Next steps, additional recruitment of Black American home educating families. The sampling based on the schedule that I presented previously to broaden and expand my comparative analysis between the United States and the UK, so Black Americans and Black Britons, and then additional development of what I am exploring as modern marronnage, which is a framework using Black home education as an example. To round out, marronnage is another example of how thanks Deborah, of how enslaved people absconded. So there are 2 different types of marronnage, petit marronnage and grand marronnage. Petit marronnage is where the enslaved person left for a couple of months, fled to the forest, to the swamps, came back to the plantation. Grand marronnage is where the enslaved person or persons decided to flee indefinitely and created their own communities in swamps and mountains in the Atlantic world. When we think about what is happening with Black home education and the tradition of Black home education, we might look at it as a form of modern marronnage, given what the educational system is in the United States of America. Thank you. I'll take questions.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I know we're going to have a bunch.
So please forgive my ignorance, but I did not understand when you were talking about somebody being legible or not legible. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so opacité, so Edward Glisson's theory of opacité says that if you are a marginalized socially marginalized person, that it is ethical for you to not make yourself legible. What does he mean by that? He means you don't have to let people know who you are, right, in various ways. So it is a one of the examples that I use is passing, right? If a person is white passing, opacité says you don't have to allow someone to know that you are, quote unquote, a person of color if you know that you're going to be discriminated against. In terms of applying it to Black home education, Black parents are not introducing their children to the educational system, right? So that they are not legible in the educational system, so that they would be legible to the technological systems, which would calcify subjective interpretations of their behavior, right? So that is legibility. So we could look at it as social legibility, which also feeds into technological legibility, right? Based on subjective assumptions, myths, biases, et cetera. Some technologists use the word obscurity, right? So to remain obscure.
There's a better one, please. Thank you, by the way, very much. It's fascinating. The obscurity, remaining out of the public eye, if you will, similar themes to what we've seen in other places, especially in countries where homeschooling is frowned upon. As a researcher, will you find it difficult then to do some of your research because of the sort of the aspect that you're looking into?
It is difficult. It's extremely difficult. There's a lot of work that has to be done before I can even ask an actual research question, right? That there are families that I'm working with right now that's really pre-research that, that are still filling me out, right? Even though I'm a privacy law scholar, I know how to obscure and how to make sure that their names are not in, formal names are not in the research, but at 100%, yeah.
Can I follow? Yes, sorry, but because of that, are the families that you're working with as knowledgeable as you are in what they're even doing necessarily, or are they?
They're more knowledgeable.
Okay.
They're teaching me, right? Remember, it's 230 years of a tradition, right? I am just coming at it from the standpoint of privacy, right? But the language that they're using dovetails with what Warren and Brandeis were talking about in 1890, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Najarian. Najarian is, there's a team of Black scholars in the U.S. We had hoped to have a whole panel. For a variety of reasons, we were not able to have all of them attend, so we're very grateful for some of these preliminary findings that they are putting together. Thank you. Sophia? Silvia, I'm sorry. Okay, I don't know where I got that from, but
It's very common, don't worry.
thank you.
Okay, so may I begin? Yeah? Okay. So first of all, thank you so much to have this opportunity to present my research that is a baby yet. Okay, so I'm just starting. I really want to begin with a small context about how this opportunity began. This began because I'm being advised by Jan de Groef and having the support and the help of Brian Ray, as well, Jacinto Jardim and Eduardo Franco from Portuguese University, that are not only supporting the research, but very, very committed with the opportunity to have a European university helping us homeschoolers to develop more research. So I'm very glad to begin in this way because we are at the GAGX conference. It is a conference that advocates for this kind of opportunities. So I thought it was a good beginning to make the context. So my main, here, I'm using both things. Okay, so my main project, the one that I expect to develop in the next 4 years, it will be about human rights in the political and jurisdictional, educational, and family approach in Portugal. However, there's a plan to put this research in contact with researchers of other European countries, so we have even a bigger goal. I hope I'm not dreaming too much, but I believe that dreams come true, so that's it. For now, what I'm presenting is this first study about family motivations and methods in a history of freedom and restriction. So I'm very, as a researcher, I'm very, I prefer, in a way, to study either the demographics and the characteristics of homeschooling as it is in Europe, but I am very excited to relate that with politics choice, legislation, etc. So let's see what we can get. But for now, I will only present you not even conclusions, but some very excited ideas that I already have from the survey that I'm spreading among homeschoolers in Portugal. Okay, just for you to have an idea, the numbers are important in this moment. So Portugal has about that amount of people, that amount of families, and we have our law since 1945 saying that homeschooling is legal. However, there are political facts and social facts that probably are bringing us to the present moment doing the homeschool as we are doing in this precise moment that I will try to show you today. So what I really want with the main study is what is behind the motivation for having homeschooling growing in the last 50 years, more or less. Because our reality is, yes, we have a law since 1946. However, the boom of more families doing homeschooling, probably it was in the last 50, 20 years, I would say. Well, I know some of the families that were the leaders, in my opinion. I not even was one of them. So I'm very excited to study what happened in the very beginning of this growing home education practice in Portugal. And why are we wanting to do homeschooling under the conditions that we have? What are the main pedagogical options? I forgot to say that we already have 3 studies done in Portugal. So a PhD study that was made in 2016, master degree that was made in 2022, but it's a comparative study about the homeschooling in Portugal and Brazil, so it's not precisely about what is happening in Portugal, but it gives us nice information. And there was another study made in 2017, I think. I'm sorry, I didn't took note about that show us the main motivations to do homeschooling at that time. So I have these references. Okay, and what was the impact that made our legislation, what the impact of this change in the Portuguese legislation? So we had this legality without a regulation making restrictions, and now we have a regulation that is showing us that we need to follow. As a researcher, I should not do this way, but I will. Too much rules. Okay, I will go on because it's too much. So I will use this both quantitative and qualitative methods. For now, I will only show you some of the main ideas that the survey is already showing us, okay? So I will not read all the slides, just for you to have an idea. So right now, this is where I get excited in the first place. So the last number that we have from our government is from 2023, and they say that we have 570 families doing homeschool in Portugal, okay? So if I want to play with numbers, and believe me, I'm good in maths and I love maths. I have already, in only 1 week and a half, 65 answers. So if I want to play with numbers, I would say I have a very good range of already. But as we will see with some of the answers that I will show you, probably we have much more, a much higher number of families doing homeschooling in Portugal. And that is one of the things that I really want to see with my study, among other things, of course. This slide should be at last. Okay, so I will come here later, okay? So I use the NARI survey as a base for my questions. Why? Because we want in the future to have a common survey to compare what is happening in more countries, but I adapt it to my own interests because of historical and social facts and cultural facts. So some of the questions will be the same, some will be not. So today I just want to give you an idea that, yes, we will study the characteristics of the family, where they live, how many they are, how many kids, which grades the kids are, the methods that they are using, etc., etc. If you don't mind, today I would prefer to pass that thing because I cannot present conclusions. I will present only ideas, and I would invite you to pay attention because I want to present the final conclusions as soon as possible with more certain of what we are saying about. Okay, so things like, for example, are people living more in countryside or not? Why I'm interested in these kind of things? Because we know that lots of people are hide from the government, so it can be interesting to see if, for fact, people are more hide or more exposed. So that's one of the questions that we are making because of that. Then another thing that I'm already realizing, it will be a challenge, is concepts. So words matter, as we all know, and I suspect that we don't have a very accurate vocabulary in non-English speaker countries. Sorry. Because we mix a lot. We really don't know, well, we know, but in our day-to-day lives, we mix everything. Homeschooling, unschooling, world schooling, everything is mixed on the same. So when I prepared the survey, I was confronted with that challenge because I have to admit, I really don't know, and I already noticed in the few answers that I have, that I really don't know if there's a mix of different conceptions about what the words mean, but it is what it is right now, so we have to work with this. More. I want to understand in Portugal how many kids we have in different grades, okay? So that's another thing. For now, I'm realizing that these 65 families already answered, letting us know that there are a big diversity already. We are not talking only about first grade kids. I remember as a mother when my kid, now with 23 years old, began, there were no teenagers doing homeschooling. There was, but there was a few. Now we have more people in different grades. We already have people attending college, so that's another thing. I have to go on because I want to highlight the thing about enrolled in the system, in the Portuguese system or not. This is only a curiosity, okay, because I asked in Portugal to do homeschooling under the Portuguese regulation. You have to have a university degree. It doesn't matter if it is to be a teacher or not. At the same time, we have another choice that we call individual learning. That is a kind of homeschooling, but we need a teacher that the government allows certificate to to be a teacher. So I had this curiosity about how many parents doing homeschooling, not individual learning, have at the same time the authorization to teach. And so the number for now is very high, okay? I don't know. Okay, so let me pass this because I know that I take too much time sometimes when I get excited and I don't want to. So that is what I want to highlight today, okay? So the question that I made was, is your kid enrolled under a Portuguese public or private school? Is your kid enrolled in a school from another country instead of a Portuguese? Or you don't have your kid enrolled in anything, in any place at all? So I think it was a nice way to try to understand what is happening. And you see, 49% of people are not enrolled in the Portuguese system, okay, already. And by the way, these 65 answers came mainly from two big groups, one Christian group and a secular group. It was not a choice, but it happened this way. And look, okay? So this is what I want to show. And why? Oh, I didn't translate this slide. I have this in Portuguese and I'm so sorry. Okay, so this is the main reason, okay? Because they don't want to follow a mandatory curriculum, more or less is this, okay? There are other reasons, as you can see, but the main reason is we don't want to follow a mandatory curriculum. The 24% is the ones that are not included. It's a non-applied answer, okay? Okay, so the main are these 4 ones, okay? And most of them are related with the curriculum. I will translate later, okay? I'm sorry. Or you can learn Portuguese. I'm joking, I'm sorry. I made questions about more formal learning, more spontaneous moments, more unschooling, less unschooling. So I want to give you an idea about that. And another big question for me, and I have more people from Portugal here, so I know that that's a curiosity for us all, is when we need to distinguish what is a homeschool style focus on having families conducting, managing, directing learning, or because of our European laws, in some cases, we have people being enrolled under the homeschool laws, but putting kids in the kind of places that I would not call schools for respect of a real school is, but groups that we could compare with central learning, supporting learning centers. I think I'm saying it right, but it's not exactly the same because the main difference is the attitude of families is putting the kids there to someone else teach them, is not to be implicated in the learning process. So this is what I'm trying to see. So gladly, I'm seeing that 58% are doing a really homeschool thing with an environment where it's the families that provides the moments and coordinate the activities, etc., etc. Okay? Okay, so I'm almost finishing. This is not conclusions, okay? This is me playing with this, with enthusiasm, with some of the things that this survey is already letting me know. So I can see that 50% of families are enrolled in countries other than Portugal, okay? Living there, because there was a question that I didn't show you, that is, where do you live? And, okay? 40% are enrolled in the Portuguese system, public or private. The main reason is to have more freedom to follow a curriculum that adapts to the student's profile. I put three dots because there are more reasons, but this is the main reason. There are a variety of options ranging from unschooling to homeschooling with an organized curriculum. So I saw that in the survey already. And the main reason is to educate respecting the students' main rhythms, providing experiences in everyday life, okay? And sorry, because I had the other, I just want to finish with the next steps. And I put the slide on the wrong place and I didn't saw it on time. Next steps. So we want to obtain a precise information about motivations, legal options, pedagogical models and relationship with lifestyles or nationalities in order to contribute a great understanding of this option in Portugal. This is expected to be a first work, as I said, which will be later expanded into comparative studies between other European countries and maybe the other countries in the world with the connection with Brian Ray. There are only two preliminary studies that have been carried out around the option of home education in Portugal, but we need not only to update information, but to deepen it is currently necessary and decisive in the political and social sector. So my main goal for the next steps is ending this survey probably in 6 months, have the main conclusions about the main characteristics of homeschool community in Portugal, and after that continue making comparative research about what is motivating this. Is this because of political aspects? Is this more cultural aspects? What is motivating these kind of choices, being or not being under the Portuguese system or not, and other things. So for now, I'm done. Thank you so much, and I'm open to get questions.
Thank you, Silvia. Questions? Yes. I should just go stand on that side.
Thanks for your presentation. I just have a question about the legal options. Is there any discussion about the privacy protections for homeschoolers in Portugal under the general, under the GDPR? And I'm wondering, because I hear what you're saying, that the laws are restrictive, but I'm wondering if there might be some legal challenges based on the GDPR that homeschoolers in Portugal might push back against those restrictions based on privacy.
I believe we have the best laws and maybe one of the worst appliances of the law, okay? I'm joking again, I should not, but yes, we have all the possibilities that we can imagine. I will begin by saying that it's very important to see the historical facts, even before the legal aspects. So having this legality for so long is something that it put us in a place that we really can use that to try to change the legal aspects. Then we have the great constitution that says that parents are owners for the education of their kids. And even in continuing that, we have our main law about our educational system has a sentence that says exactly this, with my translation. Home education is that is made by a family member at home or by someone that lives with the family. And once in a political meeting where I was with our back then Minister of Education, he told me that, okay, we cannot ban home education from Portugal because this is too much clear on our main law. So in a way, what I heard back then was if we could, we would change it even for worse, but we can. So I don't know if I answer your question because, okay?
My question is really about the GDPR, right? The General Data Protection Regulation. I understand you have a history of jurisprudential support for homeschooling in Portugal, but specifically under the GDPR, we were talking about data protection. I wonder if there have been thoughts about challenging some of these restrictions based on that.
No, as far as I know, but I can, probably I don't know everything right now, we don't, but probably I'm mistaken, but as far as I know, we don't. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Silvia.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
You're doing a great job paving the way. Rose? Yes. Thank you.
Let me see if I can put my screen here. So this is the magical thing here. Yeah. Yes. Hey. Yeah, I work for a tiny research unit for Clonlara School, for the off-campus program of Clonlara School. That means our students are all over the world. Is it not working? It's better like this? Yes. Okay. And well, why do we need this little research unit for? We want to understand the life reality of our students, and we want to understand their needs. And we know that a lot of our families are traveling. And they keep telling us, they kept telling us for some years about a little town in southern Spain, in Andalusia, where lots of them go and spend time. So that got very interesting for us, and I went there too. So the last 3 winters, I put my little camper caravan there, and I spent there 1 to 3 months, and I do look into this World School community, how they call it, and they have this World School hub there. It is created and organized by parents, and the parents come there. They also come in camper vans. They live on the campsite, sometimes even a little bit in the nature, and some rent apartments. So it's a very interesting place. They use social media platforms to organize various meetups and activities. And I'm interested in the difference it makes for families and children to have access to such a structure like this World School Hub. So that's my research question. Which educational potentials, structures of opportunity, and participation possibilities arise from the creation of a hotspot of self-directed education using the example of a World School Hub in Andalusia, Spain? And that is a long-term project. So I'm in the 3rd year. This was my 3rd winter. I'm not going to stop. I go motorcycling there on the weekends. You know why. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the design. It's a qualitative mixed method research project. So I did narrative interviews. I used an open question. I asked the families, what brings you to La Herradura? Because I want them to really follow their own logic. And at the moment, I did not use any structured interviews, but I'm going to do this later. The sample that was considered for this presentation consisted of 5 parents, and they were from 3 different countries, from France, USA, and Germany. And they had children in an age range from 7 to 17 years old. And I also talked to 3 experts, professionals in the fields that know the place. I also did observations and participating observations, especially, for example, at the beach meetups. And I started an analysis of social media posts that was very interesting. So if some of you is an expert in this field, I would like to talk to you because I need more knowledge about that and more ideas. I used grounded theory methodology, and I have the help of a tool, a digital tool that is called MaxQDR, just to structure the coding. Yeah, let's have a look on the results. these are the first results of that study. So the parents, they talked about, in the interviews, about the personal background that they have. They talked about the motivation to come there, to the place. They talked about their understanding of the term and also of the practice of world schooling. And then they talked about the experiences they had within this world school hub. So let's start with the parental understanding of the world schooling itself. So parents understood the practice of world schooling really as a counter-design or alternative approach to school education. What matters to them is a real experience in the world versus a school book experience in a brick-and-mortar classroom. And they would point out that they are looking really for a child-led approach versus a teacher-centered approach. All of the families I talked to were really long-term travelers. So traveling is part of the understanding of that term, as they told me. One main reason for them to travel is that they want their children to learn foreign languages. But they also said that traveling provides many educational opportunities and also supports their own deschooling process as parents. And by that, they mean the dissolution of their own parental conditioning with regard to school and learning. But there was another reason that was mentioned by the US family, and they said that they want to travel for the orientation of their children with regard to studying abroad later in another country. And then I found some keywords, some concepts throughout the interviews that I found were very important. So one is intercultural environment. It was very important for the parents that they provide an intercultural environment to their children. So they deliberately seek out an environment that would enable their children to experience other cultures, practices, and perspectives. And this would be very important for their view on education. What was interesting was what they said about activities. So, as I said, they would see the world school practice primarily based on child interests. And this was so interesting because even the travel plans were based on this interest of the children. So there was this one family, the children asked, what is a river delta? And instead of explaining it, they went. They looked at the river delta. They made a travel out of it. So they would look at the flora, the fauna, the geographical conditions that they find, what food can you grow there, and so on. And I don't know if you were there, but yesterday I talked about the example of a family who went to see how a certain spice is produced because the children loved it, because they wanted to know all about it. So they told me that some activities arise very spontaneously from opportunities. And so, for example, a family would just want to make a sleepover in Ravenna to go on the next day. And then they looked quickly at the mosaics there, and the child was so interested by the mosaics that they stayed longer. So these are things that you cannot foresee, but they happen. So I can pretty much say that parents appreciate the traveling really as a booster for spontaneous and very vivid learning opportunities for their children. What I thought was interesting was that kind of age hierarchies are broken down here. So parents say that they learn together with their children, together they go into new experiences, and even they learn sometimes from their children. Personal background and motivation. We had very different family situations. There were single parents, there were parents who traveled together as a couple with their children, and families where one parent would stay at home, would earn the money, and the other parent travels with the children or their child. There was also a different professional and economic background. So while some families would work digitally, remotely in the camper, for example, during the trip, and others, they offered an activity like a circus class, even made food. And then others, on the other hand, they have saved for the trip for many years. That was the case of the American family. For many, many years, they planned to do this, and they saved money because they said they had professions that they could not do remotely. He was a medical doctor, she was a teacher. Then there were this example of the family where they have jobs where they would only work a certain period of the year. The example was a cook for catering on fair trades, and this is only, I don't know, in spring and in fall, so summer and winter they could go. As for the motivation, some parents said, yeah, you know, on the road, it's really difficult to really meet people because you do not stay as long as one place. That's why we come to La Herradura and stay a little longer. And then the frost-free climate is important to families who live in a camper, because if once you have been camping in Northern Europe in winter, you know why. I did that. Yeah. Yeah, and then we have this subcategory of experiences, this category of experiences, and here I found the subcategories in the interviews: activities, places, participation, learning competency, and social interaction. So the main structure of the hub is a regular open meeting on the beach. And the meetings are announced, as I said, via social media, and they have more or less a fixed date. And then there is a lot of other activities around that, which are organized very dynamically, and sometimes they even run for a longer period of time. The ideas for these activities come from the participants, from the parents, from the children, from the teenagers. They make suggestions. One example is a father runs a chess club, and they go in a cafe, and every single table in this cafe is taken by people who play chess. What is interesting is that some activities are free, and sometimes you have to pay for them. And also what I found, and I want to look more into this next winter, is that some local residents even created some entrepreneurial activity around the needs of the hub. So you have the 80-year-old woman who is a potter, who lives there forever, who was born there, but she opens her yard twice a week, and she does pottery with the people there. But you also have art, music, and there are event locations created that also respond to the need of the community. And then they have like special events like a teenager DJ class on Friday evenings or something. For the activities, I have a long list. Ask me later, I cannot read them to you. But I have all activities that were mentioned in the interviews. But the focus is on sport activities and arts and crafts. You see the places here. These are the places that were mentioned. I don't read them to you. Sorry. Go to the next one. As for participation, parents mentioned that there is really a very low threshold for participation, a very open offer, there is a time flexibility, and there are very few rules. There are not so many rigid structures like you would probably have in a club or something, even if the children do not participate in the world school things, but would participate in other things of the town, for example. They mentioned a choir. So it seems to be very easy for the children to do activities there. What they really pointed out is the positivity that there is a lot offer, but very few obligation. The parental participation was interesting. So, as I said, sometimes they offer their own activities, like the chess club, or they are pretty much involved in other activities as well. They said it was a very positive feeling to pass on their own knowledges, their own skills, things that they like to do. Okay, 5 minutes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, let's come to the subcategory that I found was learning and competencies. Well, interestingly, within the interviews, the parents did not talk so much about cultural techniques of reading and writing. This was not a subject of the presentation, of the interviews. They would sometimes say, yeah, my daughter calculates during the day, but it was really not a focus. But there was a high focus on the learning of foreign languages, especially English, of course, because the communication within that group, even though it's in Spain, is pretty much in English. Parents experienced it as an advantage to be confronted with completely different content and languages that they haven't known by other members of the community. So one parent said, oh, now I learned some words in Portuguese. I learned even some words in Icelandic. What I found interesting was that parents told me that the motivation for their children to learn English was there because not only they wanted to be part of the community, but they wanted to teach others what they like to do. There were a girl, for example, she liked to crochet, and she was really an artist in crochet. And she saw that other children were interested. It was a French family, and she learned, I cannot explain how to do it if I do not speak English. So that was her motivation to learn English quite quickly. And then parents said, wow, we're so impressed in this community. There's so many children at age 8, around age 8, and they speak English fluently as a foreign language. So this would be a question that I would like to follow up. What about the cultural techniques, the reading, the writing? Are they learned on the side? Are they learned incidentally? That would be interesting for another time. Yeah, social interaction. I talked already about the dynamic and this changing range of activities, and that interviews described that there were many opportunities to get to know people, that they had a lot of interaction with peers, and that all the expectations they had were really fulfilled in this respect. Some of these friendships and relations are described as long-term. People would stay in contact with each other even after after their departure, and they also would go to other places together, or would meet up later on other places. So they often create like chat groups or something to be in contact, and they say, oh, I found a very nice place where we can camp, and there are still 2 parkings by my side, would you come? So it's sustainable. There are 2 different developments in regard of the age structure. In the beginning, it was just mixed, and then and it's pretty much in all the activities you can see that it's very age heterogeneous. But 2 years ago, the teenagers all of a sudden said, oh, we want to meet, we do not want to meet anymore with the little children and the families on the beach. We go to the basketball place. And then they met up at the basketball place. This is not far away, a few hundred meters. And from this, developed a group that is very stable, very active in the last 2 years. And it grows, and now there are more and more teenagers coming to this place. And it is a little different than the other group, as we are going to see. Parents say, It's a desirable skill to make friends, but it's also a challenge because you need some social skills to do that. And there is this conflict a little bit about families who are longer there or who are permanent residents and families who are just going through and stay for 2 weeks. And there's a pressure from that families who are not staying so long because they say, oh, we want to make friends. And the others say, yeah, but we cannot have new people all the time. But this was not an issue in the teenager group. The teenager group said, it's fine for us if someone just comes here and stays with us for a shorter time. We can well integrate that. Yeah, my time is over. I could talk about this for hours. I know I don't have the time. Yeah, let me know your questions. Thank you. Here I'm packing up my camp like every Easter time in Spain.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rose. I'm sorry, I don't think we have time for questions, but we'll have time afterwards.
Ask me, yeah.
Yes, thank
Okay.
you very much.
Thank you.
It's very interesting. Fadoua? Thank you.
Right, just a pre-warning, we may have some technical difficulties. Right, so my name is Fadoua Govaerts. I am a researcher at the University of Bath. I'm situated at the moment at the Center of Qualitative Research. Yes. It's just that I'm short, so I feel a bit... Yes, lovely. Thank you. Yes, so my name is Fadoua Govaerts, Dr. Fadoua Govaerts, by the way. I've passed my Viva. Yes! I'll throw my hat this Wednesday. So I'm situated at the moment as a researcher in the Center of Qualitative Research, and you'll see in a minute why that is. So my PhD was titled Through the Eyes of Home-Educated Adolescents, Their Educational Outcomes and Social Developments. I'm also a convener of the British Educational Research Association in the Special Interest Group of Alternative Education. Surprise, surprise. And also I'm founder of RENOX, which is an international conference I organized bi-yearly on decolonizing educational research and giving platforms to researchers in the Global South to connect and collaborate with researchers in the Global North. So, a lot of things that I'm going to mention today have been subtly mentioned by researchers already, but there was a question from Anne earlier this conference about positionality and reflexivity and the connection of do all researchers need to let them be clear about who they are in the research? Are we always questioned? So I believe yes, a good researcher is very good on being reflexive, and Robert gave a very good example of being reflexive as a researcher. So I'm really conscious of who I am as a researcher in my research. So I am a mother of 5, all home educated, 14 years still going. My eldest 2 in the back there are, well, they're supposed to start university next September, October, but they haven't got a clue, apparently, what they want to do after 19, 18 years of home ed. I'm not sure that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not really sure yet. But I'm really keen on participatory research and, of course, home education. My recent work on home ed was about the exam cancellations during COVID. How did the home educators navigate being private candidates in the UK when they needed access to exams? I'm also a Lego Serious Play facilitator. I also do lots of First Lego League, which in Americans is much bigger than here in the UK. And I'm writing now a book chapter for BERA on the ethics of participatory research. And also, I'm writing 2 papers now on about decolonization of educational research, the role of educators in time of a plausible genocide, and alternative education in times of crisis, the untold stories from under the rubble in Gaza, because obviously there are still education happening there as well. So all of this really, situates me in my research, who I am as a person. We heard earlier about research about who are home educators. I'm obviously Muslim, and I'm apparently higher risk as home educator. Governments or people who research home education or have a perception of home educators, it really makes, you can really unpan about who you are as a researcher and how you're being perceived by others. Also, I am European, I'm Belgian, I'm North African, I'm Dutch, I'm a little bit maybe Egyptian by step family, I'm multilingual, so all of this really influences who I am in the reason, how I interpret the data. So I think the answer to the question, Anne's not here, but yes, I think a good researcher is really clear and transparent about who they really are, what they stand for, what their values are. So back to to my research, the literature review about home education in the UK. What we already know here, all of you obviously have a background on that, but the literature here in the UK is really expansive about the legal context, the cultural context, parental motives, we hear it over and over again, and also obviously about the positive outcomes. We like to tell people about home education is successful in the UK. So where are the gaps then? So we are really lacking in England on longitudinal studies because of funding and because of academia and all of the problems that you already know. It's very difficult to have longitudinal studies on home educators. Also, the voices of young people is lacking. I'm really happy today that Philippe spoke about that today, because in England we really lack research with young people and not on young people or through the parents. We lack theoretical frameworks that really explain to academics and to policyholders and stakeholders about why it works. The conference is about it works, but do we really know why it works? How it works? Do we have theories that explain this and amplify this? We also lack accurate data for good and bad reasons, which you can argue for or against. And also we lack studies with larger sample sizes. A lot of it is qualitative research. And I think the larger was Paula Rothermel, she was here as well as a speaker, one of the largest quantitative mixed method data that was done in England. So my research, what was it looking at? It was looking at 2 research questions. Oh, and by the way, I'm introducing pictures from my participants. So all the images you see here now are actually produced by the young people, and I'll explain in a minute how. So I had 2 research questions. Obviously, having a PhD, you're restricted with what you can and can't do. You have to have a research design, you have to pre-approval, ethical boards, etc., etc. So I had to have some kind of research question, although I really wanted to have a completely participatory research where the young people could just do what they wanted. Obviously, no ethical board is going to give me that approval, say, yeah, off you go, do your PhD with whatever the kids wanted to do. So I had to have 2 research questions. So my real interest came from what do the adolescents perceive as educational outcomes? And what do they perceive to be their social development? It's all right to ask the parents that. They'll tick all the boxes. But well, how do they see that? How do they think they're learning and what they're doing and how they're developing socially? So methodology, what I use is participatory research methods. Obviously, HART 1992 is one of the big giants on participatory research. And also research with children. So the idea is that the children were not subjects in my study. They were the experts in their field. Yes, I'm a home educating mother of 5, but I've never experienced home education itself. I am delivering it, I'm facilitating it. I haven't been a child who's been home educated in this time. So, so the experts in the field were them, in their own way, with their own level of understanding, and I saw them as experts in their field rather than as subjects. Again, with having restrictions on having PhD, I had to design something. Okay, I have an idea of what I want to do. Obviously, none of this actually really happened. Being home educators, you know what it's like. You start off with one plan, it goes completely. But they were really pleased. I got the approval for it. So I had really nice 10-week plan. Week 1, I'm doing this. Week 2, they're doing this. But they had plans of their own. It didn't take 10 weeks. From beginning to end, it ended about 7 months. All right? Yes, so the first phase in red, or does it come up purple in your case? It's actually purple, but I think it's red. The first phase was about research question 1. They collect their own data with their own, whatever they wanted to collect it with, their own methods, their own. So there were, I gave them options because I had to show that I knew what I was doing. So I gave them 3 options. I gave them an example of vlogs, blogs, and visual boards. And one of them chose 2, vlog and a visual board. And then I had some choosing blogs and some. And also the whole point of participatory research that you use research that the participant, or the researcher in my case, is familiar with and is comfortable with. You know, don't give a 7-year-old an interview. You know, they don't want an interview. They want to chat to you. They want to draw. They want to play Lego. They want to. So I was really looking what do teenagers do nowadays? And vlogging and gaming, obviously, is one of the big things. So that's what I used. Or offered, rather. And then the blue area was the second phase, which was all about their social development. So I offered them, I gave an example, do you want to interview someone? And they could interview who they wanted. That, of course, was not approved by ethical board, because if they want to interview another teenager, I had to go to that parent, and the parent had to go to that child, and the child had to go to another child, and it was a nightmare. So they said, I asked them, who do you want to interview to make this thing easier and actually to make it possible? And I said, well, we'll interview our own parents. Because also it was COVID, so it had to be online. And grandparents had their own thing, and it was a nightmare during COVID. So they chose to interview their own parent on their social development. And then the green area was their own analysis. So I helped them with thematic analysis. And then the last phase was their dissemination, end of their project. And that's where I start as a researcher, analyzing all of that using IPA. So the research with young people, that strategy, that approach, I used it right from the start, right from the beginning, even in the recruitment process. I can't go and just turn up at someone or in a Facebook group and say, hey, teenage, do you want to come and do this research? I had to have gatekeepers. I had to have access to the parents first. Once the parents knew who I were, and obviously 14 years home educating, most of them knew who I was in the community. But then, obviously, I wanted informed consent of the young people. I wanted them to say, actually, yes, I want to do this. Not the parents saying, off you go, you're going to do this. It's COVID, you're doing nothing at home, you better go do some research and do something. So I really wanted to have that informed consent, and that also went through in data collection and the analysis, and also in dissemination. If I have time, I would really love to show you how they disseminate their own research. So this is just a little piece how I try to get informed consent from the young people. So instead of giving them forms to sign and a participatory information sheet, I created this little video for them. I'm just going to show you a few seconds of it. stop there. You get the idea. It was really kind of an animation video just to draw the intention and give them a kind of overview what they're doing. So I started with 8, 2 dropped out, and with 6. And in the end, 4 decided to actually disseminate their research as well. And some of them did phase 1. Some of them actually decided to do only phase 1. It's participatory, and home educators do what they want. So some of them decided to do all of it. Some of them decided to do a different order. So it was all very organic, very home ed-like to do what they wanted, how they wanted, when they wanted kind of approach. And then in the end, all of that, after they analyzed, disseminated, I used IPA to analyze all of that data as well. Just show you a quick picture of one of the data, a visual board of one of the teenagers. This is their data about what they think, how they perceive their home educational outcomes. You can see 4 different areas: physical education, cognitive development, GCSEs, and life skills. That's what she sees that her home education is all about. This is another one. This decided that his home educational outcomes is only his hobbies. And I asked him, why do you just draw pictures of your hobbies? He said, well, I do other things. I do English and math as well, but I'm not really interested in this. This is what I like. So even that perception of what educational outcomes is for him is what he finds important, rather than what others think is important for him. So I think that difference there was very, very enlightening. This is part of the vlog. I'm not sure. Can I show you a bit? Yeah. So this is what he thought is his home education is all about. He was able to create, so he had never done videos before, never done vlogging before, but he plays the video games. So he used my research project as another learning experience, how to create a vlog and how to make this intro and disseminate that in front of 80 other stakeholders, including a member of the Department of Education. This is what I do at home. So it was fascinating for me to see that. The analysis, obviously, like qualitative research, messy, colorful, step by step. They did the thing on the left, I did what's on the right. So it depended on their level of understanding and how deep they could go in themselves. The findings is not surprising, obviously, but is how they actually perceived it. So they were really keen on actually following their own interest. They were really brilliantly able to identify their learning opportunities in the things they were doing. So if they were walking outside, if they would say, actually, I saw a tree and I was able to identify what tree. That for them was a learning opportunity. And they could say, I've done some biology. I've actually identified a tree. I actually know how to do this. I've actually been able to recognize this. This is a learning opportunity. When they speak to strangers, it was a learning opportunity. When they go shopping, they were able to really articulate very well what their learning opportunities were, even in everyday tasks. That also caused a kind of blurred boundary between formal and informal learning, and also made them very independent learners themselves. Now, my goal was, okay, so I know these things from experience. I've seen them in my own kids. That's fine. It doesn't really surprise me. But what can I do with this data to make people understand? How can I close that gap between academia or publishing papers or other stakeholders to understand why is it so important? Why are they able to do this? Why is it so significant to actually recognize this learning? So through their findings, I did all the way around. I didn't start with a framework. I ended up with a framework. So again, very home-ed, isn't it? You do things all the way around. So I use the self-determination theory and the multiple intelligence theory, and also the big philosopher John Dewey, education as a process of living to make to make it clear in my thesis, why is it so important that children, or why does it work, basically. That's what it comes down to. If you're interested in the theories, there are really good theories to help conceptualize home education as a practice and the home education approaches. So in trying to theorize this experience and to come up with a kind of model of why does home education work for these 4 or 6 children, is what we heard today again. It starts with the family. The child cannot be separated from the family. It's situated in a family. It depends on the family capital, family resources, family understanding, family approach to learning and education, and that filters through in the daily process of living, the daily lives, creating learning opportunity, depending on their learning methods. That depends again on the configuration of their own intelligence. Are they natural learners? Are they logical learners? Are they outdoor learners? And that creates an interesting motivation to again learn all over again. So it's like a cycle that comes going through. So the conclusion really from the study is that a holistic educational perspective in home education is very common. Despite on-schooler, de-schooler, structured, semi-structured, doesn't matter. The significance of autonomy for young people is really important. And the integration that they didn't separate social development from education. Their social development was part of their home education. They didn't separate that. Just some recent publications, some references, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Fadoua. That was fascinating, and apologies, we don't have time for questions. I have to run to present in another room, but please feel free to stay and have conversation and follow up with our researchers. So thank you for a wonderful research track.